everybody. I think you're probably there. I was waiting for a countdown, and now I'm just going to count up and welcome you all to what a great event that Llewellyn is doing. I'm Cyndi Dale. I'm very honored to have the next half hour with you and to have your time to talk about how to deal with trauma during this time of global crises. This is my book. I'm very proud of it. I don't know if it comes out straight or crooked, but it's Energy Healing for Trauma, Stress, and Chronic Conditions. And I couldn't have timed the release of this book better, or Llewellyn couldn't have timed the release of this book better, because everywhere we look, and I'm affected by it too, we just see stress and we're experiencing stress. We're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with opening up at the same time as coronavirus is still running rampant. And I'm ground zero for some of the racial tensions. I live in Minneapolis. And so starting a couple weeks ago, I was surprised, partially thrilled, and partially terrified by some of what opened up around the protests. The terrifying part, of course, was just the violence. So it's like we've got this beautiful, hard, scary sort of soup of change that we're all living in. And even for those of us who are still isolating in some ways, many of us are wearing masks and trying to figure out, do we do this? Can we see groups again? The counts are rising. I think we're all really overwhelmed. And I think we deserve to be overwhelmed because there's so much change. I like to compare some of what we're going through in the kind of cocoon aspect of what we're in various stages experiencing as that which the caterpillar goes through before it gets to be a butterfly. Maybe we have a bit of a ways to go before we get to globally, racially, and personally and professionally actually get to be the butterflies that we're going to be. But that butterfly, before it gets to be the butterfly and it's a caterpillar, actually about 90 to 95% of its cells and its systems get basically turned to mush. There's nothing but stress when we're the butterfly kind of going through the metamorphosis and the transformation. And the cells that are actually being created, they're dormant and they start to activate and become awake, are called imaginal cells. I love that term. IMAGINAL. They're imaginal cells. And those are the ones that take over the majority of the would-be going to be butterfly's body and become the butterfly. So we're going through that in various stages, and it's scary to be going through this much change. It's scary to have so much happening outside of us and maybe even in our own personal lives. I know a lot of you are from different places in the world and certainly all over America. And at least in American statistics these days, at least 1 out of every 3 Americans are in a noteworthy way dealing with depression and anxiety, increased levels or new experiences of depression and anxiety. And one figure is that about 29% of all of the American workforce has applied for some type of benefits for unemployment, etc. So it's a big time, and it brings our challenges though back to ourselves, because if we can't immediately change the system, if we can't immediately alter the spread of the virus, besides just shutting down, which I think a lot of people are doing, is just saying, I can't deal with it, so I'm just going to go asleep, which doesn't really work because things keep happening outside of us. There's some activities that energetically we can take to assist ourselves. So one kind of approach I encourage people to take right now, because everybody is scared and it is scary when we're out of control, is to understand that there's a healthy fear versus an unhealthy fear. So not every time we're scared is it a bad thing to be. Fear, like all the other major emotions, has a message for us. So if we're dealing with our personal fear, and if we know that it's not others' fear, and we're just dealing with like a reaction that's telling us to do something different, we want to embrace that fear. Healthy fear says that there's a safety issue going on. And when we know that there's a level of healthy fear that we're feeling, we want to step forward, step backward, or to the side. When we know that there's some anger that's really our own anger and it has a message for us, it tells us we need some boundaries. I think that's what's happening with a lot of the peaceful protests is there's anger, but also like this boundary being set that's saying, enough, we're changing things now. A couple of the other emotions, there's really 5 standard feelings. When we feel sadness, when the protest started in Minneapolis, I felt really sad. I had just this overwhelming sense of sadness because I've witnessed racial disparity. I know that I am part of the issue problem, even though I don't know always what to do and how to deal with something. Sadness says we need to look a little deeper to find a place for love. Like to find a new way to be loving, like change the system or care for those who need to be cared for. And the other 2 emotions, one is disgust. So if we're disgusted with the way that Black people have been treated or certain policies that we don't approve of, that disgust is going to be saying, this isn't good for me. And then of course we have joy, which we all like to feel, that comes in many colors and many varieties. And I believe that if you follow your healthy feeling to its nth degree, like if you say, I'm scared for my personal safety, what do I need to do to create more security? And what do I need to do to be, kind of have enough money coming in? Or what do I need to do to allow this happen versus this to happen? Or for me to do this versus that? Eventually, with all the feelings, we'll get to a place of joy. We may not be ecstatic or blissful or, kind of happy, but we might be content. We might be satisfied. We might be able to feel appreciation or, have a different attitude or know, how to approach a situation in a way that's fulfilling for ourselves. Now, how do you know if a feeling you have, especially fear, is healthy or not healthy? If it's too big, if you feel it under certain conditions, the fear, in a way that you can't seem to calm yourself or get logical about what to do or how to do it, you're probably dealing with one of 2 types of unhealthy feelings. You're probably overwhelmed with others' fear. And this is a huge issue with my clients and the people like me who are over empathic. So we very empathic people can read the news, turn on the news, be around somebody who's really scared, and all of a sudden we're terrified. Well, if it's too big, and if we were pretty okay before those interactions, we're letting in somebody else's fear or a collective fear. And when the same thing can happen if we suddenly get really angry and we weren't, or really disgusted or shameful and we weren't, or really, really overwhelmingly sad and we weren't. That we have energetic boundaries around ourselves. Most of the ones I work with are called the auric fields. The auric fields are extensions of the chakras. Those are the energy centers in you and around you that can convert physical energy to subtle and subtle into physical. Energy is just information that moves. Everything's made out of it. Physical's the hard knock. You can see it, you can touch it, you can tap it, you can smell it, you can hear it, and other people will sort of join you in your experience. But subtle energy, which is sort of like 99.99999% of all reality, is the less visible, the less measurable, and the more difficult to substantiate, but it's really mostly what we're made out of. And we're made out of fields of energy, auric fields and other fields. And it's through these fields of energy that we generate, that we exchange information, we exchange subtle information with others. They don't have to be near us. They can be on the television. We can think of a friend, a half a world away, and there'll be an exchange of energy. And if we're prone to trying to help people, if we're prone to being heart-based or very empathic, it's really easy to become a sponge for other people's feelings, especially in a time like this, their fears. That week that the racial protest started in Minneapolis, I felt waves of fear for a day or two. especially one particular day. And I was like, I'm feeling a lot of my neighbors' fears and the fears in my city right now, the fears about the violence and the fears about the change. And so I sat down and I cleared my energy field, which I'll do with all of us in a couple minutes, to give us a very simple way to just gently and lovingly release what's not ours and return to who we are as well. I promised I would tell you about 2 events that could be occurring if you're feeling feelings that you're questioning if they're, really your own, or if they're something you need to deal with or not. Because the second, besides absorbing other people's issues or energies, the other thing that could be happening is we could be triggering our old trauma. We do need to deal with old trauma. We need to deal with that which is of this life and maybe even a past life. And even in that category of, wow, I've gone through this before. Maybe 300 years ago, there was a disease. I was a different soul and I lived in Ireland and there was a potato blight and it was horrible and scary and we didn't have enough food. So off we go to the grocery store and buy too many canned beans, which I sort of did at the beginning of all this. We could be triggering something we went through a long time ago, or we could be triggering what we went through as a child or even a few years ago. We also might be triggering our ancestors' memories. Science has proven that in the chemical soup around our genes, there's a, kind of a set of DNA, RNA, all kinds of stuff that are called our epigenome or the epigenetics. And in that chemical soup, we hold our ancestors' memories, at least 14 generations. And so frequently when we have a strong reaction, or we even get an illness, or maybe a mental challenge, or something that comes up for us, is because what's being triggered by contemporary events is something an ancestor went through, and our chemistry turns on how they reacted, or we start to get scared of what happened to them, unconsciously believing it might happen to us. And so within the traumas triggering within ourselves might be our ancestors' traumas and or our past life traumas, not just what we can easily perhaps track to our own childhood. And so my mom, for instance, grew up during the Great Depression on a farm in North Dakota. And so when the pandemic started, I started to get scared that there wasn't going to be enough food, because she, in a book she wrote when she was 87, which is really way cool, wrote stories about what it was like when they were growing up during that time. And for the first few months, they were growing food, but they didn't have enough of their own food. So I could feel part of myself going through this, oh my stars, I need not only toilet paper, but food. I've got to stock up on food. And my dad, who also grew up during the Great Depression, was very, very poor. His father was a mechanic and couldn't get work. And so his mother brought in laundry and cleaned laundry to make enough money. He spent his first, 8-10 years of his life living in the kitchen, because they only had like a very, very small place to live in central Minneapolis. And even the kitchen that he slept in on a mattress and then on a cot when he was young, was often filled with boiling sheets that his mother took in. And so I also had this panic that rose inside of me that said, Cyndi, you're probably not going to be able to pay your bills. I'm self-employed. I work at home. I work on the phone. My business didn't really shake. I shook, because I could feel this sort of consciousness rising out of my cells that said, this is a really scary thing. Think of what happened before. And so what I did is I stopped and I said, I'm going to heal whatever's mine from my own childhood. I also want to send energy healing to those who came before me, into my cells, back to the souls of those who, ushered me into this world. And I want to close off my energy field. So these places of vulnerability in me, I want to stay compassionate. I want to stay loving. I want to stay open, but I can't process everybody's fears. I can't process my ancestors' fears. I just want to get to where I may have an issue to release, a trust issue, a love issue, and then I want to regain the sense of confidence in my own messaging, in my own ability to track with, is this event scary or not? Or is this a good day to go to the grocery store or not? Or should I be near this person or not? And the irony for me in all of this is, in terms of the pandemic, I finally figured out that I already had COVID. I probably had it about 3.5 months ago. I had a day where I just woke up not feeling good, and I was achy and miserable and couldn't breathe well and this and that. And nobody had really shared the symptoms. So because I didn't think it was COVID, I just said to myself, this is just silly, Cyndi. You just have to get better. And so I did my clients on the phone that day. I went to bed early. I put on 4 blankets. I said, I'm going to sweat out whatever this is. And I woke up the next morning feeling pretty darn good. I didn't get my breath very easily. So the next few days when I would run the dogs at the dog park and go up the hill, I was like, do I have a heart condition? Because I'm feeling sort of tired. And then it just passed. It just passed. I think partially because I wasn't too scared. I wasn't telling myself, oh my gosh, this is going to kill you. I just didn't go there. And I finally took an antibody test about 2-3 weeks ago, and there were the antibodies. And I thought, well, there we are. I guess I had it, but I didn't frighten myself into worse symptoms. So we want to free ourselves from that which is not ours. We want to send healing to our ancestors and to any parts of us that could be getting re-traumatized during all these global and local sorts of events. And we want to be open to receiving healing and love. So let's spend a few minutes doing that, and then we'll open up the chat again. And so you can be empowered with who you are, even in the face of your own and others' fears. I encourage you to take a couple deep breaths and just get in touch with yourself, your own essence, your spirit, the who you really are. And then know that there's guides and beings around you here to assist, here to help, here to guide. So affirm their presence, their helpmate energies, and then open to whatever it is you call the greater one, the Holy Spirit, the universe. And now ask that greater presence to activate for you the inside of your heart chakra. This is that place right in your chest in which there's just as much of you above as below, to one side as to another, and where your physicality, your psychological self, and your spiritual aspects come together, united in the oneness. So I want you to just feel that space, feel that light, that way of being, that you that's intertwined with goodness. And in this place, like with all chakras, there's an outer wheel which holds our programs and sometimes other people's programs, but there's an inner wheel, an inner sanctum that's full of this pure oneness and the pure light that's unique to you, and that can also bring through energies of the heavenly. And I want you to breathe into that inner sanctum and feel as you're doing so, the guidance and the oneness is sending through you from the inside to the out, the healing energies you need. They're going to go around the outer wheel of that chakra. While you're working on the heart chakra, the same thing's going to happen with all your other chakras. You don't have to picture them or know where they all are. And that beautiful, bountiful healing and manifesting energies then going to spread through the energy fields. Going to go through your skin, all the fields around you, especially through the heart field, into the wounds outside, all the way through to the very edge of who you are and beyond. And while those healing energies, I call them streams of grace or love in motion, are coming from the inside to the outside, they're also cleansing you of others' energy. They're sending them to their higher selves. So there's nobody that's going to get hurt or all of a sudden scared or angry. They're sending energies to your ancestors, separating them from you, and to all your inner selves that might have trauma that's being activated for healing at this time. Bring yourself back into your identification in the internal aspect of who you are. Know that these streams of grace or energies are going to continue to move up and down and around and hold you in this place of true safety, where if you feel a feeling, whatever it might be, you can easily differentiate it as your own versus somebody else's, a new one from an old one, and you can follow the message as it's coming to you. Thank you for participating in that exercise. I know we're going to do some Q&A for the next few minutes, and so Llewellyn is going to reactivate the chat so I'm able to see any questions that any of you want to write in. And I'll read the question out loud in case some of you can't see your chat, and I'll share as best as I can and answer as well. So let's see if some questions are getting typed up. I heard beautiful, thank you. You're all very welcome. And the good thing about working with grace is it keeps working. You don't have to re-listen to this recording or redo this. You can certainly do it again. This kind of an exercise in any chakra that calls you. But anytime you work from the inside of the chakra out, you're going to get exponential benefits as well. Any questions anybody have? Okay, I see a K with a great question. How can you tell if you're an empath? Your way of being in the world could be synonymous with being a sponge. You're an absorber. There's many types of empathy. There's physical, you take on other people's conditions, what they're feeling in their body. There's feelings, you sense their feelings. There's mental, you might have a sense of what's going on with them. There's relational, you're aware of all their relations. There's spiritual, you just have a higher way of knowing. And so pay attention to some of those categories to see if that can help you differentiate or discern if you're an empath, really versus a clairaudience, in which case you more hear messages, or a clairvoyant, in which case you more see what's happening in the psychic community around you. So a question also, do you have any resources to check out in regard to the epigenome? 14 generations. Scientific American has 3 or 4 really good articles. You could just Google epigenetics, epigenome, Scientific American. It's a great magazine that I draw information from all the time. And, I think some of the more contemporary authors, Dawson Church, Bruce Lipton, have some good material. I talk about it in my book, Energy Healing for Trauma, Stress, and Chronic Conditions. And then you can just Google it. I like the more scientific articles. I think they fill in a little better as well. What quick protections can we use when we go out into the world? There's a 2-part protection. You can do it in 2 seconds. It takes me longer than that to explain it. So in general, what I do is I ask for gold energy to come from the heavens, from the goodness above, down through my higher chakras. There's a 9th, 8th, and 7th above your head. I bring gold energy all the way down, let it go down through my spine, my legs, through my feet. I expand that gold energy. That's going to bring positive programs into your body and in your physical and emotional and mental bodies. And it's going to give you a protection around you that basically says, I'm only going to bring in what God's will. That's what gold is. All right. And then secondarily, I like to picture energy coming from the center of the earth. It's kind of a white star down there. I bring it up through the earth, gather elements with it to come up through my feet, up through my spine, all the way up. I mix those 2 energies and boom, I'm in a really good physical and heavenly bubble of protection simultaneously too. Nettie's asking, is there a good book on empathy? I have a great book. I wrote it. Llewellyn's Little Book of Empathy. It's little. Most of my books are really big. And I also wrote Spiritual Empathy. They're going to give you great techniques and tips for how to do empathy. There's lots of other good writers out there. So again, I would read some articles, what it means to be, Judith Orloff is great. What it means to be an empath, how do you cope with it? Judith Orloff has some great resources as well. Margaret, do you have a good daily practice for balancing the chakras? I do the technique I just told you all about. I bring down the gold energy. I bring up that like white energy. And while it's moving, especially through my spine and my energy field, my chakras naturally align. I work with the 12 chakra system. There's 7 in the body, but there's lots out in the energy field too. So just make sure you let those energies expand around you, because it'll bring you in balance with those out of body ones that'll help you with mysticism, harmony, commanding energy, connecting to nature, and your own uniqueness as well. I know Alex is asking, can we watch this video? Llewellyn said yes. I don't know how. But I do know that the answer is yes for that as well. So you can certainly rewatch this again. Meadow, love to hear about the ancestors. I know. And one thing I'm going to add about that, because I'm not seeing another question yet at any rate, is I just want to give you a tip too. Before we're conceived, there is a place in our body that doesn't exist yet. I mean, the body doesn't exist, called the Ming Men doorway. Imngmen. It's between the kidneys, and it's going to become the kidney meridian where your adrenals sit as well. And in Chinese medicine, it is said that that doorway is open before conception to bring our ancestors' energies into us. Well, that can be good, and that can be not so good. So you might sometime want to sit down. Maybe you can feel a little bit of this now, but sort of take that same mix of the energy from the middle of the earth and the gold energy. And you might want to send that, also have your guides help you send that through that Ming Men doorway, because that's going to send healing and blessings to your ancestors. Just think about that mid-back, right between your kidneys. And it's also going to clean you of ancestors' energies. So that's another nice short exercise that you may need to do more than once, because we have a lot of our ancestral issues inside of us. But that's another way to approach it as well. My new book, I'm being asked when it comes out. It comes out in July, but you can pre-order it on Amazon too. I just got my copy like yesterday or the day before. So I'm like super excited to bring it around with me. Sometimes forget what my books say, because I wrote them like a year and a half ago as well. We have time, I think, for another question from Frankie. How do you remove grief? Oh, grieving the loss of a loved one from your body. So first of all, we start with the removal of grief by doing the grieving. One of the things I talk about in my book is that when we have a trauma, the body, subtle and physical, creates kind of like a shock bubble. And the traumatized part of ourselves, or the grieving part of ourselves, gets sort of surrounded with this energy that keeps it safe until we can process our feelings. So what I suggest is, if you're meditating or doing some writing or interacting with your guides, like if you still have grief, which is very normal about a loss, ask if you can find if any part of you is still in a shock bubble. And you might visualize that bubble. You might feel a part of your body where you're holding, some of the grief. It's not processing. It's not moving because you're still in shock, or you're being held because there's beliefs, maybe from family systems, that says, grieving isn't, a good thing to do. And just start sending these same streams of grace to that part of you, and start releasing any part of you that's stuck in your grieving process. So I do that. My mom died a little over a year ago, and I didn't really grieve her until probably starting 6 months ago, because I'm in charge of everything. I helped her when she was alive, and I'm helping with the death process too. But I very deliberately went in and did something like that for myself a few months ago, because I was like, Cyndi, you can't just keep kind of doing all the doing without feeling all the feeling. And it helped me very slowly start to grieve the passing of my mother and the missing of her as well. So those are a few suggestions. I think PTSD works the same way. We'll have to close in about a minute. But if you have PTSD, you have a part of you or parts of you stuck in one of these shock bubbles. So start the process by asking spirit, asking your guides to find that part of you and start to send healing and energy and support and love. And let it be a process, because we don't want to just return, kind of to processing really quickly, because then we can't necessarily cope with our everyday lives either. I'm going to sneak in one more answer. Is there a difference between the dead versus the ancestors? No, not really. But obviously you can be connected to a dead being that's not an ancestor. It can be a loved one who is a friend or a spirit that's just hanging around. So ancestor is a very specific type of the deceased. I want to thank you all for showing this up, for Llewellyn for holding this, and all of you for showing up. It's just been my pleasure. I talked fast, sorry for that, but I also wanted to make sure we covered as much as we needed to for today. So I honor all of you for being here, and I wish you all continued healing and grace as well. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the seminars that Llewellyn is putting on too. So goodbye.